in the frozen north, where snow swallowed the sky and icy seas crashed against ancient shores, a civilization emerged. Fearless, relentless, legendary. We call them the Vikings. History remembers them as savage warriors, masters of the longship, wielders of axe and fire. But what if their strength didn't come from brute force alone? What if their power came from beyond this world? In 793 AD, when Viking raiders stormed the holy island of Lindisfarne, ancient records describe not only plunder and bloodshed, but violent whirlwinds, flashing skies, and fiery dragons crossing the heavens. Were these merely omens, or something far more otherworldly? Norse mythology is filled with impossible tales. A ship that folds into a pouch, gods who live in the stars, and two ravens that circle the world every day to gather knowledge. Odin, the All-Father, didn't just rule with might. He gathered intel. He sent Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, to scout distant realms and report back. But could these winged messengers be more than just birds? Could they have been surveillance drones misunderstood by ancient minds? Then there's Skidbladnir, the magical ship that needed no wind and traveled at lightning speed. Foldable, portable, always ready. Is that mythology or alien engineering? And what about the dwarves? Master craftsmen living underground, creating god weapons with otherworldly power. Are they mythological beings or memories of extraterrestrial engineers? In this episode, we unravel the hidden truths buried within Viking legends, clues that suggest our ancestors may have had contact with visitors from the stars. This is Ancient Aliens in Viking lore, the hidden truth finally decoded. And if what you're about to discover is true, then everything you thought you knew about history is about to change. Lindisfarne, dragons in the sky, or UFOs. In the year 793 AD, the quiet island of Lindisfarne, sacred to Christian monks, was suddenly transformed into a scene of bloodshed and terror. The first Viking raid recorded in English history had begun. But while most textbooks focus on the brutality of that moment, something far stranger was also recorded. According to multiple contemporary sources, the skies above Lindisfarne did not remain still. Instead, monks and witnesses described terrifying signs in the heavens. Immense whirlwinds, lightning flashes, and fiery dragons flying through the air. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, one of the most important early English texts, even begins an account of the Viking Age with these phenomena. It's as if the storm in the sky was just as important, if not more so, than the storm that came from the sea. Let's pause for a moment. Why would monks, men of faith and scripture, include such vivid supernatural descriptions in a historical chronicle? Could it be that they were simply trying to explain the unexplainable? Or were they trying to document something real, using the only language they had? When we hear fiery dragons today, we imagine mythical creatures. But to ancient people, that term may have been their closest comparison to bright, glowing objects streaking across the sky, moving with intelligence and speed. Think about modern UFO sightings. Sudden appearances in stormy conditions, unnatural silence or violent winds, bright lights or glowing orbs flying in erratic patterns. All of these match what Lindisfarne's witnesses described in 793. And here's the twist. This wasn't the only time something like this was reported in Viking-related events. Across Scandinavia and the British Isles, other Viking raids are similarly linked with celestial phenomena, eclipses, thunderous skies, even fire snakes, in ancient Norse poetry. Why does this pattern repeat? Some researchers argue that what we're seeing is not coincidence, but contact, that the Vikings may not have been working alone, but were either being watched or even guided by forces not of this earth. There's another clue hiding in plain sight: the Viking obsession with the sky. Their ships were engineered not just for oceans, but for stars. Their mythology is astronomical in nature. They mapped their gods to constellations. Their greatest stories involve sky chariots, portals between worlds, and beings descending from above. So when lightning tore across the sky at Lindisfarne, was it just a storm? or a cover for something descending. Let's entertain a radical but increasingly compelling idea. The Vikings, often painted as ruthless barbarians, may have been in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, intentionally or not. Their raids, their navigation, their timing, it was all uncanny. They could traverse thousands of kilometers, strike like ghosts, and disappear again. They had no GPS, no modern maps, and yet their accuracy was beyond logic. Unless they had help, even the word dragon in early medieval texts has layers. In Latin, the term Draco could also refer to fiery serpentine lights and was occasionally used in descriptions of comets or strange aerial objects. We've also seen this pattern in other ancient civilizations. In Mesoamerica, the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl descends from the sky. In India, the Vimana fly machines are described in ancient texts as sky chariots that glowed like fire. In China, the Long, or dragon, was a celestial being of power and wisdom, often appearing before major dynastic shifts. So ask yourself, why do so many ancient cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, all describe fiery creatures in the sky around moments of historic transformation? And why does that moment, the very beginning of the Viking Age, mirror so many others? Maybe what happened at Lindisfarne wasn't just a raid. Maybe it was a signal, a marker, a turning point in human history, a moment where the human and the otherworldly collided, not in a fantasy story, but on a very real battlefield. And if the skies at Lindisfarne really did open that day, if fire and storm truly dance above the monastery, then we must ask, who were the Vikings, really? And who, or what, was watching them from above? Odin, Thor, and Freyr, gods or visitors from the stars. For centuries, the gods of Norse mythology have stood as towering symbols of power, mystery, and myth. But what if they were never just gods? What if they were something else entirely? Let's begin with Odin, the All-Father. Described as a ruler of Asgard, Odin didn't just lead the gods, he watched the realms. He gave up an eye for knowledge, drank from the well of wisdom, and sent his two ravens, Hugin and Munin, to gather intelligence across worlds. He was not a warrior god in the traditional sense. He was a strategist, a seeker of truth. Now pause for a second. Does this sound like a mythological king? Or does it resemble the profile of a commander of an observation fleet? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest that Odin may not have been a deity at all, but rather a technologically advanced being, a leader of non-human origin, stationed in what the Norse called Asgard, but which may have been a ship, an orbital station, or even an off-world colony. Then there's Thor. Wielding the hammer Mjolnir, Thor controlled the weather, summoned lightning, and unleashed thunder upon his enemies. His hammer was said to be so powerful it could flatten mountains, yet it always returned to his hand. To modernize, Mjolnir sounds less like a weapon of fantasy, and more like a high-energy projectile weapon or electromagnetic pulse device, the kind of directed energy technology that today's militaries are still trying to develop. And the fact that it returns him, could it be magnetically controlled, remotely recalled, or even operated by neural command? Freyr, on the other hand, governed over fertility, sunlight, rain, and peace. He was the bringer of harvest, the one who made land flourish. But myths describe him not just as a benevolent god, but also as one with access to a ship that could travel anywhere instantly. Skidbladnir, the foldable vessel built by dwarves. This ship always caught the wind, no matter the weather, and could be carried in a pocket when not in use. Again, we must ask, are these stories simply the result of imagination, or are they attempts by ancient people to describe technology they couldn't possibly understand? Let's consider the bigger picture. All three of these figures, Odin, Thor, and Freyr, commanded forces that seemed magical to ancient eyes. Lightning, omniscience, weather control, instantaneous travel. But if you strip away the mythological language and replace it with terms from modern science, a different picture begins to emerge. What we may be looking at are not just gods, but representatives of a civilization far more advanced than our own, whose abilities were so far beyond comprehension that early humans could only explain them as divine. And here's where it gets even more compelling. Asgard, their heavenly home, was said to be connected to the earth by a rainbow bridge called Bifrost, a glowing pathway between worlds. Ancient texts describe it shimmering in the sky, ever shifting, a connection between realms. But what if Bifrost wasn't just metaphor? Could have been some form of wormhole, energy beam, or transport corridor used to move between dimensions or planetary locations. To early Norse storytellers, it was a bridge of light. To us, it might have been a stable conduit of interplanetary travel. So the next time we read a saga, see a thunderbolt, or hear a legend of Odin's ravens whispering truths from afar, we might ask not what did they believe, but rather, what did they witness? Because perhaps the gods never left the sky. They just stopped being called gods. Hugin and Munin, ancient surveillance drones. In Norse mythology, Odin, the enigmatic All-Father, was known not just for his wisdom, but for how he acquired it. He didn't sit on a throne waiting for knowledge to come to him. He sent it out, every single morning. Odin released two mysterious beings into the world. Hugin, meaning thought, and Munin, meaning memory. They were described as giant ravens who flew across the 9 realms, observing everything that happened, gathering secrets, listening to whispers, witnessing conflicts, and then returning at nightfall to whisper their findings into Odin's ears. At first glance, this might sound poetic, mythical, symbolic, but let's ask a different question. If you were an ancient person trying to describe advanced aerial surveillance technology, what would you compare it to? The closest thing you knew was a bird, but these weren't just birds. They never failed. They never rested. They returned every night, and they could see and hear everything from across the realms. That's not biology. That's precision instrumentation. Ancient astronaut theorists propose that Hugin and Munin were not living creatures at all, but early interpretations of autonomous reconnaissance drones. Think about it. Sent out daily to scan vast regions, return with data, possibly equipped with visual and auditory sensors, connected directly to Odin, their operator. In today's terms, they sound like military-grade UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, used for long-range surveillance. And it gets stranger. Some texts describe Odin as listening to Hugin and Munin without them speaking. This has led some researchers to believe that Odin may have had a form of neural link or telepathic interface, receiving data directly into his mind. Is this just poetic flourish, or an ancient description of brain-machine communication? Even more compelling, Odin is often referred to as the Wanderer, a figure who walks unseen, knows secrets no one else does, and always seems one step ahead. Why? Because he had real-time intelligence. If Hugin and Munin were real, as machines, not birds, then Odin wasn't just wise. He was informed, connected to a live stream of the world's happenings. Now consider this. In nearly every mythology involving advanced beings, gods, angels, sky people, there are recurring themes of flying messengers, watchers, or recorders of events. In the Bible, the cherubim are winged beings that observe and report. In Hindu texts, Garuda flies across worlds at the speed of thought. In Mesoamerican belief, the eagle often carries messages between the gods and men. Is it possible all these birds weren't birds at all? Could they represent a universal technology used by advanced visitors across cultures to monitor, collect, and transmit information? And if so, who was Odin receiving this data for? Just himself? Or was he part of something larger? A network, a mission, an extraterrestrial intelligence operation cloaked in myth? Perhaps Hugin and Munin are not just charming footnotes in Viking legend. Perhaps they are evidence, clear, structured, technological, of something far more profound. That our ancestors saw the sky not as a metaphor, but as a machine, and that Odin, the one-eyed watcher, wasn't listening to birds. He was reading intel. Skid Bladner, the pocket-sized starship of the gods. In Norse mythology, the god Freyr is best known as the bringer of peace, fertility, and good harvests. But there's something else, something far more bizarre that sets Freyr apart. It's not his glowing aura of benevolence. It's not his role in ending feuds or guiding crops. It's a ship, a vessel called Skidbladnir. According to Prose Edda, Skidbladnir was the most magnificent ship ever built. It could travel to any destination, regardless of weather or terrain. It always had the perfect wind, never faltered, and, perhaps most astonishingly, it could be folded up like cloth and placed into a pouch when not in use. Let's pause right there. A ship that's self-navigating, independent of wind, immune to storms, and foldable into pocket size? To the people of ancient Scandinavia, this was the stuff of divine magic. But to us, it sounds eerily familiar. Let's break it down. First, the idea of a vehicle that's not dependent on wind, that already eliminates traditional sailing ships. Skidbladnir moved with its own propulsion, suggesting some form of self-generating energy source. Could it have operated using electromagnetic lift, anti-gravity, plasma propulsion? We don't know. But what we do know is that autonomous navigation in hostile environments is a hallmark of advanced aerospace craft. Second, its speed. Skidbladnir was said to reach destinations in a blink. No mention of long travel times. No description of storms slowing it down. Just instant arrival. This matches the conceptual behavior of theoretical faster-than-light vehicles, or interdimensional transport ships capable of bending time and space. It might sound like science fiction, until you realize NASA and other space agencies are actively studying concepts like the Alcubierre drive, which involves warping space to move faster than light. What if ancient myths already witnessed something similar? Third, and most mysterious, the ability to fold. Skidbladnir could be collapsed and carried in a pouch. A full-size ship, instantly miniaturized. This is a kind of detail that defies explanation, unless you assume advanced technology. Today, we are experimenting with nanomaterials, programmable matter, and dimensional compression in theoretical physics. Scientists speculate that matter might one day be stored in a compressed quantum state, only to be reassembled on command. To the Vikings, this sounded like magic. To us, it sounds like something not this world. And who built this ship? Not Freyr himself, but a race of beings known as the Sons of Ivaldi, often described as dwarves in Norse mythology. But these weren't your typical fantasy dwarves. They were master engineers, living underground, creating devices so powerful they could only be gifts for gods. Some theorists suggest that the dwarves were not mythical creatures at all, but extraterrestrial technologists, small in stature, gifted in science, and known for staying hidden. Think about it. Small beings, living in concealed locations, capable of creating weapons, ships, and tools far beyond human understanding. That sounds a lot like the modern archetype of gray aliens, beings associated with UFO lore, known for technological superiority and secret behavior. So let's ask the bigger question. If Freyr was gifted a foldable, self-propelling ship capable of instantaneous travel, where did he go with it? Skidbladnir wasn't just for crossing oceans. It was said to traverse realms. It could journey between worlds, from Midgard Earth to Asgard and beyond. That's not a ship. That's a multi-dimensional transport vessel. What if Skidbladnir wasn't just a symbol of prosperity? What if it was a real craft, seen by early humans, misinterpreted as myth, but remembered for its impossible abilities? And if such a ship existed, who else used it? Were the gods truly gods? Or were they interstellar travelers, each equipped with their own version of Skidbladnir? Maybe Skidbladnir wasn't unique. Maybe it was standard issue. And maybe, just maybe, the stories we tell gods riding the skies were never fiction to begin with, but fragments of truth, folded into time like a ship in a pouch. Sons of Ivaldi, dwarves, engineers, or extraterrestrial technologists. In the heart of Norse mythology lies a strange and powerful group of beings, the Sons of Ivaldi. They weren't warriors. They weren't gods. They were something else entirely. Craftsmen, engineers, creators of the impossible. According to ancient sources, The sons of Ivaldi were a race of dwarves, mysterious beings who lived underground and possessed unparalleled skill in forging magical tools, weapons, and devices for the gods. They built Mjolnir, the thunder hammer of Thor, Gungnir, the spear of Odin that never missed its target, and Skidbladnir, Freyr's foldable ship that we just explored. But here's the mystery. These weren't just simple tools. They defied the laws of nature. They responded to thought. They returned when thrown. They folded into nothing. They were, in every sense, advanced technology. And the beings who made them, described as small in stature, reclusive, and living deep underground, the sons of Ivaldi bear an eerie resemblance to something very familiar in modern UFO lore. Gray aliens. Let's compare. In countless eyewitness reports from around the world, grays are described as between 3 to 4 feet tall, highly intelligent, skilled in bioengineering, technology, and manipulation of energy, often seen operating spacecraft or conducting experiments, rarely speaking, communicating through mental impressions or direct neural links. Now apply that lens to the Norse dwarves. What if these weren't mythical creatures, but actual extraterrestrial engineers, remembered through the fog of myth, living underground? That sounds like bunkers, bases, or even subsurface installations, possibly located inside mountains, lava tubes, or deep within the Earth's crust, secluded from human civilization, yet occasionally surfacing to deliver knowledge, offer tools, or intervene at pivotal moments in divine mythology. Does that not perfectly align with ancient alien patterns? And it gets deeper. The sons of Ivaldi weren't just blacksmiths. They were creators of self-aware weapons. Mjolnir wasn't just heavy metal. It had targeting capabilities, return flight, and could only be wielded by those deemed worthy. Sound familiar? Today's militaries are developing smart weapons. Projectiles that adjust mid-air, lock onto targets using infrared, and return to sender if used. What if Mjolnir was exactly that? A weapon designed not just for physical impact, but for controlled, conscious deployment. And who would create such a thing? Certainly not a primitive blacksmith using hammer and anvil. No, such craftsmanship suggests precision manufacturing, nanoalloys, and energy-based systems, hallmarks of non-human technology. Even the ancient Norse texts seem aware of their uniqueness. Dwarves weren't treated like mere fantasy creatures. They were revered, feared. Even the gods respected them. And in some sagas, these dwarves set the terms, controlled the outcomes, and withheld their creations unless bargained with. That's not subservience. That's authority. Now consider this. Nearly every ancient culture has its version of the underground makers. In Mesopotamian lore, the Anunnaki were said to dwell deep beneath sacred mountains. In Zulu tradition, beings called the Abantabamlaba, the people beneath the earth, were said to control powerful magic and technology. Even in Hopi mythology, the ant people rescued humanity by taking them underground during times of catastrophe. Is it coincidence that civilizations from vastly different regions, who supposedly had no contact, describe small, powerful, underground beings responsible for major advancements? Or is this the memory of an ancient, global presence, a race of engineers who interacted with humanity in a way that became legend? Maybe the dwarves weren't alone. Maybe they were part of a wider interstellar guild of technologists assigned to work with various pantheons across cultures. In Norse mythology, the sons of Ivaldi are often portrayed as reluctant creators, summoned only when something beyond comprehension needed to be made. What if they weren't part of the Viking gods' mythology at all? What if they were inserted, called upon by Odin, Thor, and Freyr when technology beyond even their understanding was required? Could Odin have been the commander, the field enforcer, Freyr the ambassador, and the sons of Ivaldi the science division? It may sound far-fetched, until you realize the tools they made shaped the fate of gods and humans alike. So the next time you hear about magical blacksmiths forging god weapons underground, ask yourself, what if they weren't blacksmiths? What if they were builders of the stars? Trelleborg and the ley lines. Were Viking fortresses built on an alien grid? At first glance, the Viking fortress of Trelleborg, located in Denmark, might appear to be just another ancient ruin. Circular walls, longhouses, and earthen embankments weathered by time. But upon closer inspection, something extraordinary emerges. Trelleborg isn't just circular. It's perfectly circular, mathematically precise. Its gates face exactly north, south, east, and west. And more intriguingly, it's just one of several nearly identical Viking fortresses spread across Denmark, all aligned along a straight line. Let's take a step back. How did a seafaring warrior culture, supposedly without advanced instruments, achieve this kind of architectural symmetry and geospatial accuracy? We're talking about 4 massive structures, constructed nearly 1,200 years ago, each oriented with an almost obsessive focus on cardinal directions and alignment with one another. Now here's where it gets even stranger. In 1982, Danish pilot Preben Hansen noticed something bizarre while flying over the region. Trelleborg wasn't just in line with the other Viking ring fortresses in Denmark. When extended, this line ran directly south, passing through Europe, all the way to Delphi, Greece, the legendary sanctuary of Apollo, god of the sun. Coincidence? Or part of a global design? To ancient astronaut theorists, this alignment raises serious questions. In multiple cultures around the world, sacred sites appear to follow patterns, straight lines, geometric grids, and astronomical alignments that span continents. These patterns are often referred to as ley lines, invisible pathways of energy or geomagnetic force, believed by some to link sacred and mysterious sites together. The Great Pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, and now Viking ring fortresses? What were the Vikings aligning with? And more importantly, how did they know where to build? Remember, the Vikings were navigators, yes, but their expertise was in sailing, not land surveying. No compasses, no satellites, no GPS. Yet here they were, placing fortresses hundreds of kilometers apart, all precisely oriented and aligned. Could they have received outside help? Some researchers suggest that these Viking structures were built on nodes of an ancient planetary grid, a kind of energetic framework that early civilizations may have been aware of or even guided to use. What if Trelleborg and its sister fortresses weren't just defensive strongholds, but beacons, markers, or even stations along an extraterrestrial network? We've seen this pattern before. In ancient Egypt, temples aligned with Orion's belt. In Peru, the Nazca lines trace geoglyphs across an invisible map. In China, sacred mountains form exact triangles that match lunar cycles. In each case, culture separated by oceans and time somehow built with the same awareness of geometry, direction, and cosmic connection. Could the Vikings, often dismissed as primitive marauders, have been part of the same hidden knowledge? Or better yet, could they have been participants in something larger? Let's go further. If ley lines are real geophysical pathways of power, then building on top of them would grant a site energetic significance. Some believe ancient people tapped into this power for rituals, healing, or communication. Others suggest these locations were used as navigation markers by spacecraft, just like pilots today use fixed beacons to chart routes across the globe. Think about it. A ship traveling through Earth's atmosphere or above it would need recognizable, consistent landmarks to calibrate direction, speed, or descent. A series of energy-charged sites, spread out in exact lines, could serve just that purpose. And if that's the case, Trelleborg may not have been a fortress at all. It may have been a terrestrial waypoint, a stop on an ancient flight path, part of forgotten infrastructure built not for war, but for cosmic transit. So here's the question no one dares ask. What if the Viking Age didn't begin with ships from the sea, but with craft from the sky? What if Trelleborg is less about who it kept out, and more about who it welcomed in? And if these alignments were intentional, then someone or something knew exactly where to place them. Ley lines and UFOs. Were ancient fortresses refueling stations for alien craft? What if everything we know about Earth's geography, is incomplete? What if beneath the soil, the stone, and the silence of the past, there lies a global system, not built by us, but by visitors from beyond this world? According to a growing number of researchers, ley lines, those invisible, ancient alignments that connect sacred sites across continents, might not be random at all. They could be something else entirely. Flight paths, not for birds, not for humans, but for UFOs. Let's look at the evidence. Across the globe, countless ancient monuments appear to sit atop perfectly straight lines that stretch for hundreds, even thousands of miles. Temples, fortresses, stone circles, pyramids, from Stonehenge to the pyramids of Giza, from Machu Picchu to Angkor Wat, and now, Viking ring fortresses like Trelleborg. These structures were built centuries apart by cultures who supposedly never communicated, using vastly different languages and belief systems. Yet somehow, they all follow the same invisible grid. Coincidence? Or cosmic cartography? Here's the shocking hypothesis. Ley lines were ancient navigation corridors used by extraterrestrial craft, designed to follow Earth's natural magnetic field, a planetary energy grid invisible to the naked eye, but very real in the realm of geophysics. And just like modern aircraft need refueling stations, extraterrestrial ships may have relied on energy-charged nodal points along these lines, places where the Earth's electromagnetic energy was particularly strong. These nodes, often located at ley line intersections, became the ideal landing zones. Safe, stable, energetically potent. To us, they're temples and fortresses. To ancient aliens, they may have been charging stations. Let's take this further. Many UFO sightings in modern times have occurred at or near ley line intersections. Glowing orbs hovering over ancient sites. Triangular craft descending silently onto sacred ground. Lights appearing and vanishing at specific angles along geographic lines. These patterns are not random. In fact, researchers have overlaid global UFO reports on the ley line maps, and the overlaps are undeniable. So what are the implications? If extraterrestrial craft followed these lines, then Earth wasn't just visited, it was mapped with mathematical precision, using geomagnetic architecture that predates our modern civilization. And here's where it gets truly mind-bending. These same lines often connect sites associated with gods descending from the sky. Apollo, Quetzalcoatl, Osiris, Odin. In nearly every mythos, beings of immense power descend along beams of light, chariots of fire, or heavenly stairways. Could these poetic descriptions be misunderstood accounts of ships following ley corridors, moving from one energetic waypoint to another? It's possible. Imagine Earth as a cosmic airport, with ley lines as the flight routes and sacred sites as terminals. Some were arrival gates, some departure zones, others maintenance hubs, each one powered by Earth's own energy field. And that brings us back to the Vikings. Trelleborg and its sister fortresses weren't just built with unusual precision. They were built in places no ordinary sea-based people should have known. Far inland, perfectly aligned, and now shown to sit on ley lines that extend all the way to Delphi, Egypt, and beyond. If the Vikings were only sailors, how did they access this knowledge? Or were they guided by the gods? Or by something even older? Maybe ley lines weren't just used by the gods. Maybe they built them. And if our ancient ancestors saw ships arriving and leaving at these energetic hubs, they would do what any culture would: build temples, altars, and fortresses at those very spots, memorializing the mystery, even if they didn't fully understand it. Which leads us to one final, profound question. If ancient fortresses were placed on ley lines as part of a global energy system, is that system still active? Are the lights that appear above sacred mountains, desolate ruins, and silent stone circles just echoes from the past? Or are they check-ins from the stars, pilots landing, refueling, and waiting for the right moment? What if the gods never left? Across the wind-swept fjords and frozen forests of the ancient north, the Vikings forged their legacy in blood and fire. But as we've discovered, Their saga may run far deeper than mere conquest, because behind the longships and axes, behind the myths and runes, lies something far more mysterious. The gods of Norse mythology, Odin, Thor, Freyr, weren't just symbols of human imagination. They wielded powers that defied explanation. They controlled storms, bent light, summoned energy, and traveled across worlds. But what if these powers weren't divine? What if they were technological? Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, described as all-seeing, ever-returning messengers. Could they have been ancient surveillance drones, transmitting data across dimensions? Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, an unmissable weapon that returned his hand, could have been a magnetically guided energy device, misunderstood by early storytellers. Skidbladnir, the foldable ship of Freyr, capable of instantaneous travel and small enough to fit in a pouch. Was it a compact interstellar craft, operating on principles we're only beginning to grasp? And then there's the sons of Ivaldi, small, secretive engineers said to live underground, crafting god weapons. Were they mythical dwarves or extraterrestrial technologists, remembered through distorted memory? The deeper we looked, the more we found. Trelleborg, a Viking fortress engineered with impossible precision, was just one of several aligned perfectly along cardinal directions and along a straight line stretching to Delphi, Greece. Coincidence? Or did the Vikings build on ley lines, ancient energy pathways crisscrossing the earth, used by alien craft for navigation and refueling? Just as modern aircraft follow pre-mapped flight routes and stop at refueling hubs? If so, then perhaps these ring forts weren't just strongholds. They were stations, beacons, on a planetary grid established long before recorded history. Throughout this journey, we've uncovered connections that stretch across time and space, patterns that refuse to be ignored, stories that may not be fiction at all, but fragments of a truth too extraordinary to accept until now. So what if the gods of Viking lore were never gods at all? What if they were visitors, engineers, commanders, and navigators, interacting with early humanity under the only title we could give them, divine? And what if the myths of thunder and magic were just technology so advanced they look like miracles? Maybe our ancestors didn't just dream of beings from the stars. Maybe they met them. So the next time you read a Norse saga, see a rune, or walk near an ancient stone circle, ask yourself, are we uncovering history or remembering it? Because if the stories are true, then maybe the gods never left. They're just waiting for us to catch up